Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you if this game's worth your time and bandwidth. Today's game is the Rogue Prince of Persia in Early Access. Dead Cells meets Prince of Persia in the second 2D game in this franchise this year. Is this a kingly roguelike? Let's find out. The Rogue Prince of Persia is a new game from the Dead Cells guys, so you can bet it's a 2D action platformer roguelike. And as mentioned, this review is covering the Early Access version, released in May of 2024. The story here is currently pretty light, where essentially the Huns have invaded the prince's home, and he needs to give them the boot. Thankfully, he still has his magic talisman, so if he dies, he travels back to the start of a run to try again. There are a few story beats around finding information in one run and using it to explore new zones in another, as well as a handful of characters, but nothing particularly engaging just yet. When it comes down to it, a lot of the game systems are borrowed from Dead Cells, which isn't a bad thing. You have the large Metroid-esque zones filled with warp points that allow you to either zip through the main route or sidetrack for goodies at the risk of death. You have permanent currency you'll acquire and send back to town, which is used on blueprints to unlock new weapons and talismans. It's the actual minute-to-minute gameplay where Prince mixes it up. The game has a heavy emphasis on parkour, with you being able to wall run in any direction so long as there's, a wall behind you, as well as jump, climb, and vault over enemies stylishly. This high mobility means there's more than a few platform challenge rooms for those who want significant rewards, but it also impacts combat. The Prince is very fragile. Anywhere from 5 to 2 hits can take him out, meaning you're expected to act like, well, a rogue when it comes to combat. You have your usual attack chains and charged hits, but the game changer is the almighty kick. While it does no damage, knocking enemies into each other stuns them, or burns all of their armor should they have it, and kicking enemies off ledges or into spikes is an instant death, regardless of enemy. Never since Dark Messiah of Might and Magic have I kicked so many people off cliffs. Upgrades come in the form of straight weapon levels, but also an amulet system. You can have 4 at once, and they have specific patterns to buff the ones next to them, meaning how you align them is basically how you make your build. In this current version, there's only 2 bosses and 4 zones, and that's the Rogue Prince of Persia. Dead Cells in its rogue loop, but emphasizing mobility, platforming, and parkour when it comes to combat. So what did I like about the Rogue Prince of Persia? Well, as mentioned, I find this game's combat really engaging, as playing as an agile swashbuckler definitely fits the Prince's main theme, and weaving and guiding enemies only to kick them into a spike trap is incredibly satisfying. Additionally, the parkour is fantastic, and it really opens up the levels in some unique ways. I had an aha moment where I realized that with some ingenuity, I could just climb up an elevator shaft that in any other game I would have to fix the elevator to go up. Free movement is core to the Prince of Persia games, and it works great here. And lastly, I imagine the art style will be controversial, though I will say, as an initial naysayer, it grew on me to the point where I enjoy it, but the music is something I think everybody will like as it's so unique. It's a fantastic soundtrack that complements the game perfectly. When it comes to the bad, there is shockingly little content here. And yes, I know it's in early access, but only 2 bosses and 6 zones with minimal story beats means if you have even a little skill at these types of games, you'll be done before hitting a 5-hour mark. Additionally, the amulet system, while neat, doesn't lend itself to build synergies in ways I'd hope. The placement orientation mechanic is clever, but leads to there being only one good spot to put it in, and since there's a limited number of them, it just makes the whole thing feel very constrained. And lastly, there are a lot of technical issues, from frame rate jutters to glitchiness and odd interactions. It was never bad enough that I missed a critical jump or something, but it was annoying. As you know, I rate games here on a 3-point scale: must play, maybe consider, and don't bother. And for an early access game, I think the Rogue Prince of Persia is off to a great start. Its unique approach to 2D combat and platforming is really engaging, and the Dead Cells Metroid-like maps work even better with your parkour skills. However, in its current state, there just isn't enough content to merit a purchase unless you really love Prince of Persia, and a lot of what is here is fairly bare bones and pretty rough. Still, this is absolutely a game worth keeping an eye on, and I could see it flourishing into something incredible. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you played the Rogue Prince of Persia, did you even know it was coming out? Please let me know what you think about it and Dead Cells in the comments. And regardless, make sure you keep an eye out on the Rogue Prince of Persia.